Hi, how's it going today? Welcome to In the Room. I am here with some lovely, wonderful people today in honor of Disability Pride Month. I'm here with our wonderful education co-chair, Jai Yoko, as well as Grammy-nominated producer, songwriter, and artist, Chris Redding. We will be starting off a conversation in honor of Disability Pride Month, which will just cover being a neurodivergent artist, songwriter, and really navigating the world in a career as someone who has a unique perspective within this world. And we'll also be joined with Jazz Hands for Autism towards the end of the session. So stay tuned and thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much, Jay, for starting off.
Absolutely. Thank y'all for having me. Thank you for having us. Chris, thank you for coming and chat with us, man. How are you today?
I'm good. Such a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. And it's just good to share experiences and, talk to people that have like-minded experiences and yeah, just happy to be here.
So, in case anybody is just jumping in today, we are talking about neurodiversity, all right? Not simply as a diagnosis or a challenge, but as a creative force that has always existed within music. So, Chris, before we get into the industry and how everything is going on now, I want to know more about you and the story behind you. Tell me how long have you been doing music? What inspired you to do music? Where are you from? Like, give us the basics first.
Sure, yeah, I think I've been, doing music for most of my life, but it's always been a part of my life. Since I was like early, like maybe 12 or 13, I could just remember like sitting at the piano, playing tunes and like hearing music and seeing music. I was diagnosed with ADHD at age 13 and then noticed that I had synesthesia traits. And that's just been a part of my musical experience and my musical journey, just incorporating all of those elements.
I'm always on mute, man. So you recently had an album out. And your album was Grammy nominated. And I've done extensive research because I'm just a geek, but also because it features some of our former rant family, if you would. But I read that your album was
So,
inspired by your son and his autism. Can you tell us a little bit more about how that came alike?
mhm. Yeah, first shout out to Ramp, Latchy and the whole team. But yeah, the colors of my mind was inspired by my son's journey and just like our journey together, like understanding his diagnosis and what that looks like and his interaction with music. One of the most important things for a parent is to be able to, connect and relate to their children and be a part of their growth process, whatever it is, if it's neurotypical kids or neurodivergent kids. And for us, it was, we really saw the connection with music. My son, he's nonverbal Christian, he's 7 years old. And, we just noticed very early on, wasn't making eye contact, wasn't really saying a lot of first words, or some of the words that he did say, he stopped saying them after like the first couple of months or so. And so we were kind of concerned. Once, we followed up, it took him maybe about till he was 2 years old to get diagnosed. And once we found out he was on the spectrum, and that's when things kind of shifted in terms of, okay, active with therapy. Let's try to understand the things that he likes, the things that he's interested in. And he just always showed that interest in music. And so when I would play music for him, his face would light up, his eyes would light up. He started making more eye contact. He started trying to like say words and try to show me things like on the piano. And that's when I realized it was something special there. So that kind of opened up the conversation. I think you're on mute again.
Yo, it keeps going on mute like automatically it's winning right now. No, I was saying it's super cool hearing how, the music that you create inspired your son. So my nephew is autistic. This is why I was also excited to have this conversation. And one of the things and the tools that we use with figuring out what his needs were with music as well. So it's always cool to hear how music
Wow.
is helping different people in different ways and just how powerful it is. So kudos to you to just like paying attention, man. I think it's hard, especially in black households and black communities, sometimes navigating that journey of not only being diagnosed, but finding the tools and getting used to the new lifestyle that is created once we realize one of our loved ones may be on the spectrum. But again, just kudos to you for paying attention to your child, but also giving him the tools that he needs to thrive. That's super dope. And just kudos to you for being a dope father, man.
I,
Um,
appre- I appreciate that. I kind of look at it as like, it's our responsibility first, as parents to, understand, what our child's needs are. And, before the world comes and says what their needs are, we need to have an understanding of just who they are spiritually, personality wise. And so when I noticed that, I was just like, yo, say less. We locked in. Let's turn up. Let's get the music going. And it's just been that kind of creative experience with he and I and just the whole family, really. So
I love it.
thanks.
Absolutely. I love it. How did becoming a father change not only your perspective on neurodiversity, but your perspective as an artist?
I would say, you know, I really remember how I grew up and how my mom advocated for me. She fought for me. It was a time, growing up in the '90s was like, you was just a bad kid if you were ADHD. You just was labeled as like, this bad kid. So, but I was just really curious. I wanted to learn more, and I realized that I learned things better in rhythms. So I would have to have a beat to it. I would have to have a pattern to it. And sometimes I'll be in class and just beating on a desk, and that was disruptive. So I would get put out of class, and my teachers just didn't know what to do with me at the time. And then I discovered the marching band, and like that kind of changed my whole relationship with school. I started playing, get my drum line on, and but that just made me excited about going to school and wanting to be there and getting involved in extracurricular activities. But as a father, growing up seeing my kids wanting the same things, like interested in playing the drums, interested in instruments, it's just like reliving that experience all over again, but this time just like in a more focused and driven way where I can be like, okay, I know exactly what this is, and I want to meet them and try to mitigate some of the hurdles that I had to go through, right? So, and as a musician, I would say it's just opened up the world and the possibility of music. I've been very fortunate to meet some very very talented people like Ifu here on the line in the Jazz Hands for Autism organization. That it's just amazing what you can do with music, and it's just endless the possibilities. And I'm talking about from a creative perspective, but I'm also talking about from a business perspective as well. I feel like there's a saying in the Bible that says, your gifts to make room for you, and you know, I stumbled. I feel like I stumbled across a whole new niche and genre of music that I'm not gonna say never existed, but it was surely like not as defined as we see today because um, community has shaped that. Building relationships and art and music is all about sharing your perspective. So I'm just happy I can share my perspective and reach that specific community and, just go endless possibilities with the music.
I love it. I love it. And shout out to the drumline band geeks. I was one of them as well, but that was
Yeah,
also
yeah,
how I figured out I was a little bit different.
yeah.
I was the same disruptive. I was always banging on the tables, and cafeteria time was always
Yep,
about the who's doing the beat and who's doing the freestyle. And then it was like, go to band class, and then everything in life changed.
yep.
I was more motivated for school. Like when I used to get in trouble for not wearing a uniform, none of my teachers ever called my parents. They went to my band director, and that was like that was all you needed to get me right was to threaten not being able to march. So I definitely
Yeah,
see how music started in
yeah.
all of us early. We
You,
just
you ain't
didn't
gonna be
know
able to play that drum.
anything, man. Anything. I need to be able to play. I
Yeah,
need to be able to play.
yeah.
I love it, man. Once it's crazy, like when you put the pieces together when you get a little bit older and you start seeing like the signs that you had when you were younger, but it's like we just thought we loved music, right? But we were all on the spectrum low key.
Yeah, yeah, definitely a way of life, man, too. You know, the music, it's definitely a way of life for sure.
Definitely, definitely. So I want to switch a little bit into kind of the work that you're doing now, aside from your music. So I see that you often describe your work that is rooted in the neuro arts movement. So for people who've never heard that phrase, or maybe this is their first time hearing it, what is neuro arts?
The neural arts and the neural arts movement, I think, is a very unique perspective. It's a perspective of the neurodivergent individual, the individual with disabilities that may see the world in a more colorful perception. It is an interpretation of art, music, sound, in such a unique way, that I express as, life. We look at art and we interpret art much more differently, and um, we implement art in our lives in a more unique way, maybe than others. For me, it's a rhythm. Life is a rhythm. I can do that deal. I can do that. Um, that partnership, that opportunity. Once I find a rhythm to it, and once I understand um, that perspective and what needs to be said in those spaces. Um, for me, that's all like color. That's all sound. That's all those different perspectives that's coming. And me, that kind of defines what the neuro arts movement is. It's, people that were marginalized in for so many years in so many spaces. And when I say spaces, I mean, in the workforce, being a creative, a neurodivergent creative on a job is very difficult because it's a very a lot of jobs, there's not a lot of room for creativity. So we have to reimagine jobs. We have to reimagine um, experiences and partnerships and what that looks like. And we have the ability now more than ever to reimagine them in our own unique way. And so, we're seeing that, with streamers, we're seeing that with artists that are not following the norm. They're not going with the status quo. They're not going with the pattern that was carved out. They're just being authentic, and they're telling their stories and their experiences, and they're letting it shape not only their future but the communities that they serve. So I'm excited about this. I think it's a very unique time. It was a time in music where you had to be, are you the next this or the next that, or you had to, be this particular genre or this particular style. Now I feel like you could just be yourself and all of your flaws, all of your experiences. You could just be honest about it. And I think that the world needs that now more than ever because we're seeing this sort of three-dimensional view of what life really is with social media and everything. So
Not gonna be on mute again. I love hearing that because I think when we hear the word neurodiversity, it's always like a medical or educational lens, if you would. And I think you're starting to like switch the perspective of how we're starting to look through an artistic lens about being neurodivergent and being different, and just bringing that to a forefront. And maybe brains don't have to have just experience like the world differently. They create differently. We solve problems differently. Ultimately, we contribute to the industry differently, regardless of what is supposed to be typical, if you will. So I love that you're switching the perspective of everything.
Right, right. And it's just for me, I don't even know if I would even give myself credit of like, you know, switching the perspective or changing the game. It's just me, just like, I don't care. I'm just gonna be honest. I'm gonna just talk about real experiences and real life. When you think about it, autism was a couple of years back was not a attractive topic to talk about. It was not something that people wanted to hear about, especially in creative spaces. But now it's something that it's like, wow, like this is a real life experience, and that journey is real. This is everyday life for me, and for my family. So it's, I kind of peel back that lens of, just kind of doing, what people want to see or what they want to hear. It's like this is me, this is my chapter. So I'm happy to share those experiences. And when we share our experiences, there's millions of other individuals that may be going through the same thing and may be experiencing some of the same things. And you speak to those people, you connect to those people. People that don't understand that they're not your calling. They're not the ones that you're supposed to, reach. So, and I think that the internet and how content is distributed today, it helps that because you can find your people and just talk directly to them.
I love it. I love it. It's like finding your tribe and finding the people that accept you for fully being yourself without having a mask in this world.
Absolutely. Masking, that's big. That's real big. I'm learning to unmask every day. And people with autism and ADHD and neurodivergence, we're kind of taught to mask ourselves and to, certain behaviors, certain things are not appropriate. But when we really think about becoming a more neuro-inclusive world, those masks they come off, and people can actually authentically be who they are. You know.
For those who might be
Or
hearing
feel
it like,
accepted.
for those who might be hearing masking for the first time, could you give them an insight on like what that means and what we have to go through sometimes when we mask, and the difference, I guess, life is when we start to unmask?
Sure, yeah, like so masking is just like basically putting the veil over like how your brain really works and being I would say like holding areas of yourself back out of fear of judgment and perception, what people may think of you. Um, Masking is like, I'm gonna change this behavior um, because around certain people because I know that they're not gonna like it or I'm not gonna fit in. And I think that we all mask, we all do that. It's not necessarily a horrible thing when you think about it because I mean you think about it, you got your work voice, you got your uh, when you're hanging out with your friends and it's sort of almost like a shifts in your personality, but when it comes to neurodivergence and it comes to, just core things on how your brain works and the way you think, right? And how you think and how you process things, that should never be something that you should feel ashamed of or something that you feel inadequate. It should just be something that's said and be like, this is how I see the world. This is how my mind works. This is the things that I go to first. Um, and yeah, that should be accepted more.
Agreed, agreed. You brought me to a little point that I want to segue, and that's if you're comfortable with it, right? So a lot of us neurodivergent people, we do different things, right? So some of us stim,
Mhm.
tick, fidget, whatever you may have. If you're comfortable sharing, what are, I guess, some of the things that you do within like your spectrum of being neurodivergent?
I still tap. I still tap. I still, like if you look at my feet right now, they're bouncing because like it's just me. It's about it like keeping the pace, keeping the time, like measuring time and experiences through like real vibrational like moments, right? So I do that a lot. Not happy about it, but I bite my nails still. I try to stop that, but these are all like little stems, that I do. I have a song on my album called Stemming, and I sort of like mimic. I'm always stemming. Like if I'm like taking one part of a song, I'm saying it over and over, repeating it, and then my wife is like, "Shut up! Like I can't take it no more." But that because I'm like really analyzing like the notes, and I'm really analyzing like the feeling, everything, the whole visual aspect I see in my mind about that particular sound. But my son, he stems in a different way. So he stems like with for the vibration, like the vibrational sounds that gives him comfort, that makes him feel safe, that makes him feel calm. And so I mimic some of those sounds in the song in my album called Vocal Stemming. And in that song, it's like there's a frequency, a 528 frequency that I play and on a pad, and I do stemming sounds that are like similar to his voice. And I also have his voice um, they get us through the day. They get us through challenges. They get us through tough situations. Like, it's that movement. It's that movement that we need to stimulate our brains.
I love it. I love it. Thank you for your transparency. And I like to ask folks because I'm a fidgeter. I don't know if you like tell that I can't keep still in the seat. I'm always like messing with my hands. I normally have fidget toys, and it's literally like so. Lachi just put out a new album, and one of her songs on it is called Fidget, and she
Fidget, saw that.
finessed me to do background vocals on it, which I've never done in my life. And she was like, Jay, but I want you on this song because you fidget, and we all know you do, and you're finally not hiding it, so it makes sense. I'm like, okay, you're cool, but I'm always this is why I got
Wow.
a drum line. These hands are always moving. I can't like it feels like it works with my brain. Like my hands are the feet of my brain, if you will. When I'm talking, when I'm on panels and stuff, it's always going. When I used to negotiate, I used to be in the backyard and my girl would just watch me on the ring camera and just see how many times I would just pace back and
Yeah,
forth, back
yeah,
and
yeah.
forth. But it's something about the movement that like we just need our thoughts to flow through movement. So again, thank you for your transparency and just being able to teach people sometimes when they see us, like it's different. Like you said, your son does the audible thing. My nephew does the same thing. So he hums and he's done it his whole life where that's what calms him down. Now he's gotten to the point where just like myself, he sings random parts of songs. Like I feel so bad for my partner because for the last 2 weeks I've been rapping random Jay-Z lyrics and it'll get like real intense with me, like whispering it to her to being in her face, like, yo, dude. And it's like she doesn't say anything. She's just like, you on one right now. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to be so intense, but like, I just was feeling reasonable doubt for a minute. But I wanted to ask that question just to show people examples of like what we do in life just to regulate ourselves, if you would. But that way, when they start seeing people in public, instead of giving that, what's going on? Hopefully now they're kind of nod their head like, oh, that person's stemming. That's cool. You feel me? Like that's what they do to help themselves out. And I've seen other people now that they learn it, they encourage it from other people, or they stem with their family members and their friends to make them feel inclusive. So again, thank you just for your transparency and using ourselves to be able to teach folks like this is what we go through, or this is how we, regulate life, if you would. Um,
Absolutely.
so we've explored where your work comes from. I want to switch a little bit to what happens in those different ways of thinking when we meet like the industry. that wasn't necessarily built for us neurodivergent creatives in mind, right? So how has being neurodivergent shaped the way that you create, whether it's collaborating or just navigating the music industry as a whole?
Yeah, I think from a creative perspective, it's allowed me to it has allowed me, it's challenged me creatively, right? So like um yeah, I always start out with an idea, something that's just special to me and important to me. And I think that it's very important for a lot of artists to focus on the things, create music for yourself. You hear a lot of major producers talk about that, Rick Rubin. A lot of them have said that, like, create for you first, right? And then I think where the challenge comes in is, right, um, the music industry, a lot of people don't realize this, but it is built on collaboration. You have to collaborate. It's important because music is a big canvas that exists everywhere. So collaboration is key. And what's challenged me is listening to what's other perspectives and what other people their interpretations and um you know connecting my output to that and saying, like, okay, this is what's trendy now. I can understand that, but I can still also be true to myself. I can understand what people are used to hearing, and I can challenge um what they want to hear, or what they should, what my perspective is, right? What I feel like what should be trendy or what should be hot. So you have that element where music is first for you, but it's also that's that second layer of it where it's like, okay, how does this exist in the world, and how does it exist on a grand scale, and how does it exist compared to other perspectives that's out. But as far as navigating in the music industry, a lot of people don't know this about me, but I'm a marketer by trade. So marketing is like color for me too. So I understand, like, certain words, like when I'm reading things, certain words jump out to me on the page, right? And it paints a picture for me. And so being able to position yourself, I think, especially as an indie, um, it was a once upon a time, you got a record deal, and then you got industry executives that sort of built up your entire image and they managed all of your marketing. Now, as an independent artist and as a, artist of today, even with record deals, you're responsible for marketing and branding your own self, right? So where do you fit? Where's your, in this big puzzle? And so being neurodivergent, where it has shifted my perspective, in the market, has been like, you know, um, really taking a dive into what is accessibility looks like, and what the areas that we're not in, the spaces and places, and that brings about opportunities, right? We think about our everyday experiences, like going to a baseball game, going to a concert. What is your role as a neurodivergent artist or individual, right? In those spaces, how do you exist in those spaces? And how do you develop programming? How do you develop opportunities, connections, partnerships, community relations? All of those things, how do they come together for that experience for you as a neurodivergent individual? So I've been really excited about that. Sometimes I'm more excited about that than the music, because I'll work on a project and I'm like, wait a minute, I got this whole grand idea, but I got no music. So I gotta, put the ideas down, go back to the music, because it all starts with the music. It all starts there. Without that, there's no product, so you have to start with the music, and you have to start with that idea there. And the music is a representation of who you are. But then you think about how it exists in those other spaces as well.
I like it. I like it. If you can redesign one aspect of the music industry to better support neurodivergent creators, where would you start?
Oh, that's interesting. Um, if I could redesign any aspect of the music industry of how to better support neurodivergent creatives, I would say from an executive standpoint, right? Just let them do what they want to do, like, and let them express themselves, you know? Um, don't be afraid of that. I think that there's so much fear about, oh, people get so afraid of neurodivergent artists because they're doing something that nobody's ever done before, and it's going to be so it's going to change the game, and it's going to, it's a threat to everything that exists. And these are like gatekeepers that are talking like that, right? And it's like, no, they're just advancing the conversation. There's an infinite opportunities. There's infinite, money to be made. It's infinite, but we need people that think outside the box to think that's their job. They have to. You as an executive shouldn't be like, oh, like they're gonna make me obsolete or make my job obsolete or make the label obsolete. It's just like let the conversation keep going, and things are going to evolve. There's always going to be spaces and places. Like the neurodivergent artist is not going to change um, the not going to change every aspect of the business, but they're going to change their one aspect, and it's going to evolve, and it's going to create more opportunities. Some opportunities will disappear, but there's going to be um, more opportunities created. So let artists and people that are creatives think outside of the box and introduce new ideas. Let them be experimental. Um, Allow more experimentation on the business side of music, because music is an asset. It is an asset. It is a commodity, but I think that the way we use it now is being challenged. Like, 10 years ago, we didn't know what a reel was, but or that content is a place where music lives and it's an asset. Now people are consuming music differently. That's why I am really tapping into like sound healing and understanding the medicinal side of music and where music can exist in the medical spaces, right? But that's a conversation that needs to be had, right? And it needs to be challenged, and we need to make room for it.
I think you definitely hit the nail on the head when you said starting with the execs and starting from the top down to be able to make sure that like change happens, if you would. I could not agree with you even more. And even with the getting into the medical side, but even just all the realms, I feel like people don't realize how much music connects to almost every realm in the world, from more entertainment, sports, medical, medicinal, you name it, music touches it. And I think if more people understood the power of music and how we could use it for a tool versus wanting to make some money, or how we can be able to do both in a balance, that we can be able to have just a more acceptable world. But I think you are spot on with using it for healing and finding ways to relate to different people versus just making money off of it. The money's going to come, but I also think that with impact, income will follow as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why we got, great minds on this call, man, like yourself, like you fools, like doing amazing work with the Jazz Hands for Autism and really utilizing music in spaces that we did not think about, 10, 15, 20 years ago. We just saw music as just a source of entertainment. But I believe music is much more than that. And we should really explore those other sides of it, you know.
Absolutely, absolutely. Speaking of kind of health and being neurodivergent, we're in a music industry that often celebrates the hustle culture, if you would, right? The get money, sleep later kind of culture.
Mhm.
And I think being neurodivergent, something that I'm even learning within myself is burnout looks a lot different with us. Recovery looks a lot different with us. How do you protect your creativity while also protecting your mental health?
Oh man, that's powerful. That is powerful. I was thinking about that today because I was like, man, I got this project going on, I got this going on, this going on. And sometimes you just gotta shut down. So I created a rule after I think it's like 5 o'clock or so. I just cut everything off and then just do family time. Like literally cut everything off in the studio, shut everything, start reading my emails. You have to prioritize that time, and that's what I'm learning. Is like you have to like yes, you there's always going to be that idea. There's always going to be something like yeah, like you have to execute on this now. But I'm learning like just for your own sanity, your own mental health, you have to know when to just say no to things and also when to stop, like when to shut your brain off, right? And like now I listen to a lot of like white noise. I listen to like, a lot of calming music. And, I listen to that before I go to bed. Sometimes I just, just I have a like a that little JBL speaker that does like the lights and sensory lighting. And I just sit there and I just like let my mind just drain out all of the stuff that just been, racing through my mind all day. And you have to. That's the self-care aspect of all this. Like get your grind on, get your hustle on, do all that, but at a certain time, shut it down, shut everything down, you know, and be intentional about it. Like, oh, it's time, shut it all down, and you have to feel that way because you can't let all of these projects and things that you're working on feel like it has the control over you. You know what I'm saying? You have to show that you're in control of that, and those things are just, they exist. They're really powerful. They're important, but they don't determine like who you are. Like the things that really um speak to who you are is the time that you spend with your loved ones, the the quiet time that you have with your partner, the conversations, real human connection, the emotional aspects, like being in tune with that. That's very important. That's important for your mental health.
Thank you for sharing that. I think it's extremely important for people to realize that sometimes we just need to unplug and stop and recharge ourselves. I always tell people, including myself, because I have a horrible habit of this where I'm like, your literal battery is dead and you're still trying to go. Like I did it yesterday where I'm like, if I can just get this proposal out by a certain time, and it's like, but you're off time, you're 2 hours past what was supposed to be your off time, and now you're realizing it's going to take an extra 2 hours to even be charged to get back to that point. So thank you for saying that, because I think that's really important for anybody, honestly, but specifically for people who are neurodivergent, taking time to unplug, to recharge, and recharge a little differently. I'm definitely a sensory person where I like brown noise, if you would. That's what I'm getting used
Mhm.
to now. And the different, just like you said, the hurts are everything, to be able to kind of reset the brain. Just thank you for mentioning rest. I think it's something that is, we're talking more on it now, but in a very hustle culture industry that we're in, sometimes rest is frowned upon, where I'm trying to motivate people that rest is part of productivity as well.
Man, rest is important, man. All that work, don't sleep, all that's crap, man. Like focus on resting, man. Get your rest because you can't. The other day, I had a call with somebody that was like a big player in the game, and I'm like, this is a very important call. But I was kind of burned out. Like even when I was taking the call, I was like, oh man, I'm kind of burned out. And I was like on that call, I know I wasn't my best. I had so much brain fog, and I usually try, really exciting, trying to pitch my idea and pitch my vision, but I went my best. And after that call, I was like, man, I know I wasn't my best. And I just got up from my desk and just got into bed and took a nap. And it was like, I have to know when to recharge because you want to be your best at, the moments where it's important and where it's needed most, and you can't do that if you're not if you know if you're you're not operating at 100% if you're not rest up.
Shout out to the power naps, man. They're life changing for real, for real.
Take
So
a nap. Just take a nap.
it's so simple, man, but it's life changing advice, believe it or not. Speaking of advice, I want to round
Let's
it off a
go.
little bit with some advice, right? So, what advice would you give to an artist or a songwriter who feels like they don't belong because they think differently or because their brain works differently?
Don't listen. Don't believe what people say or think. Just create. Just create. Just create. Put it out there. No matter if we get one like, two likes. Social media is not a validation machine for you to go by and to live by. You have to make music for you first, and you have to create for you. And if it makes sense to you and you get it, then that's all that matters. People will catch on. I don't listen. When I first had the idea of making an album about my son's autism and that embodies that, a lot of people was just like, "Why would you talk about that? You should be talking about you know something fly or like." Whatever. Like you could talk about so much stuff, and it's like, why would you? And it didn't make sense. And then, two Grammy nominated, is making sense. So my thing is that you can't listen to no what nobody say. You just gotta push and keep, just create for you.
I love that. I love that. Let's say last tough question, if you will, but not really tough. Um, Tools or resources, any of them that you would suggest for anybody who are listening who are trying to adapt being neurodivergent in this music industry?
Yeah, man, getting on platforms like this, very powerful. Like networking that has changed my life, being a member of the academy as well. Going to the spaces. Sometimes like, one thing I would say to neurodivergent artists is you have to be careful that everything isn't just existing in your mind and you have to get it out. You have if it's what's the goal? Like what's the short-term goal? What's the long-term goal? Um, and if it's to, okay, I want to get this out and win a Grammy on this or a project or to, get it to go number one. If that is the long goal, then you gotta start first. So you go ahead and register. You register it to be so it can chart on Billboard, Go ahead and join the academy, uh, join, platforms like this. Join and get in the mix, like get a part of the conversation. Because sometimes I've noticed this myself, like it's such a big idea, but it's only in my mind. Nobody else knows about it, only me. And you can't be like that. Some artists are like that for years. They just hold on to things, just get it out. This is the time to just get everything out and put it out there and just let it fly. And then just exist in these circles. And then when when you are truly authentic and you truly are intentional with the art, people will hear it. Your gifts will make room for you.
I love that. Your gifts will make room for you. That's
Yeah.
amazing. That's my highlight from the convo. So we speaking of resources, and I think this would be the perfect time to bring in Dr. Ifu from into the conversation because so much of what we discussed today is already happening through the works of Jazz Hands for Autism. So, Dr. Ifu, your organization has created pathways for autistic musicians not only to learn music but to perform, build careers, and be seen professionals. From your perspective, what resonated most in today's conversation to you?
Wow, I know Chris, so right, we're like dialed in, so everything. But if I was to pull out one thing, is what you said. Your gifts will make room for you, and I'm Christian, and so Scripture like really guides my life. And there's two scriptures that really, to be very honest, undergird the work that Jazz Hands does. We're not a religious organization. This is just me and the way that I approach the work. One is your gifts will make room for you, and the other one is we are all fearfully and wonderfully made. So I believe that there is something of value that everybody has to give, regardless of what your challenges are, regardless of where you're from, regardless of all your various points of identity. There's something that you bring that is unique, that is valuable, and I think that there should be room for that to be received in anywhere you go. So that's really the undertone of the work that we do at Jazz Hands. So what really resonated with me is, just not shrinking back from your uniqueness, not shrinking back from your difference, but recognizing that the way that you see the world, if you're neurodivergent, the way that you operate, the way that you create is something that is unique, that is something of value, and something that people in your community, even if you don't know them yet, are waiting for and looking for. Yeah. So, yeah, definitely.
Amazing. Amazing. Can you tell us more about your organization and the work that you all are doing?
Yeah, of course. So before I get into that, I do want to just thank you both, Jay and Chris, for this powerful conversation. And, I want to close with something concrete because everything Chris has shared and everything that was shared in the conversation about the neural arts movement and navigating the industry as a neurodivergent creative is what we do at Jazz Hands every day. Chris's Grammy-nominated album, it lives in our Jazz Hands music library. That's how we got in touch with each other. We have our music library. It's the first one featuring over 300 tracks created by neurodivergent composers and songwriters. And we launched that in 2022, and Billboard magazine called it a groundbreaking model for inclusive music industry practices. But I want to emphasize some of the information behind it, some of the economic case behind it. So our musicians at Jazz Hands over the last 12 years have earned over $52,000 through gigs, sync placements, teaching opportunities, and that is really an untapped workforce. So if I'm speaking to the label executives, the industry heads, the people who are the employers, I guess, for lack of a better word, that's an untapped workforce. And our musicians' work, Chris's work, proves what we've known for 12 years, that when you remove barriers, when you provide sensory accommodations, when you have flexible pacing and clear communication, neurodivergent artists can participate and excel. And access shouldn't depend on finding one magical studio or one enlightened producer. True inclusion requires systemic change. And I'm a big systems person. So I think, instead of just one person or a handful of people being able to access, how can we change it so anybody can be able to access it, right? And I believe that what needs to be done is that we need to make sure that everyone, especially neurodivergent students, can tap into the power of creating and interacting with music. Like you both said, the way that you found yourself in the music industry was somebody saw that, okay, you were tapping on the tables, and they said, instead of saying, oh, you're going home, you're going to detention, they said, try band class. They saw something in you where they didn't see your actions as a deficit. They saw it as, okay, this needs to be channeled in the right way, right? And so my doctoral research at USC, I studied 10 parents of color whose children participated in music performance programs. All their children were all autistic. And 100% of those parents, after they saw their child perform on stage for the first time, they sought out more opportunities for their child after that, just that one time. And it's because music performance, music in general, creates a compressed timeline where skills that will typically take months to display are observed in 4 to 5 minutes. And that display of resilience, that display of, memory, all those things, it shifts the perception in people. So the neurodivergent individuals aren't the ones that have to change. It's really the perception of other people that is creating the barrier from neurodivergent students and creatives. And so shifting the perception of others determines access, and that access is key for opportunities along the lifespan for people who are neurodivergent. So when Chris talks about accommodation of his creative process, about mental wellness, about rest, about accessibilities, these are not nice to haves. These are economic imperatives. And one thing he alluded to is that essentially labels, managers, and even other artists, they're leaving talent and money and innovation on the table by not finding ways to accommodate and interact more and create more room for neurodivergent creatives. Innovation, in my opinion, I think innovation comes from neurodivergent brains, but because you have to see differently, you have to think differently about the world in order to create something new. So I think that we're leaving a lot of things on the table from an economic standpoint, for the executives by not creating more room for neurodivergent, artists and, individuals. So the way that Jazz Hands, we're hoping to change this beyond just our program that where we serve our musicians directly. We are now working on training educators, practitioners, studio labels, studio heads, label executives to create the conditions that Chris described. A space where neurodivergent minds don't have to mask, where pacing, is as in line as possible with their creative process, where collaboration looks different but can create something extraordinary. So at Jazz Hands, we've trained over 100 educators and we've reached over 1,400 students. And my goal is to, by the end of next year, by December 2027, to train at least 700 educators. And if these people only interact with and reach just 15 students, we would have reached over 10,000 students just in LA County, right? So, but it's not, like I said, it's not just for educators. We need studios, recording studios, to adopt sensory-friendly practices. We need labels to rethink A&R through neurodivergent and neurodiversity lens. We need songwriting sessions and writing camps to build in processing time. We need industry gatekeepers to understand that accessibility isn't about lowering standards. It's about removing irrelevant barriers so the music can speak. So Chris's journey in the music industry, his Grammy-nominated albums, exist because someone advocated for him. He mentioned his mom advocated for him, and because he found community, and now he's become an advocate for himself. So all in all, like, my closing statement is really, and this is of course not to Chris or you, Jay, because you both understand it already. This is to everyone else that I believe needs to understand neurodiversity more, is to not just celebrate neurodivergent artists, but to hire them, to train their teams to support them, to advocate for them, and to partner with organizations like Jazz Hands, like SONA, that have been doing this work for over a decade. Because the neuro arts movement, it's not coming, it's here. And the question is whether the industry is going to catch up and be able to leverage that to bring more innovation, and also for them on their end, make more money for themselves as well. So that's my closing piece. That's some things about Jazz Hands and why I believe that neurodiversity, once again, is not just a nice to have, it's an imperative. Like, now is the time. If you're not opening up and making sure that your label, your studio, your school, whatever, is accommodating to neurodivergent individuals, then you're going to be left behind.
Wow. Well said.
Thank you. That was supposed to be 1 minute, but I don't know if that was like 5 minutes or 4 or 10. I don't know, but I just had a lot to say. So, yeah, my younger brother is
Awesome.
neurodivergent. He has ADHD. He's autistic. He's been a DJ. He's a computer engineer. And the way that he found his group, his people, the way that he found his calling was because somebody didn't just say, "Oh, you're not doing well in school, we're going to kick you out." They say, "Okay, how can we channel your interests into something that actually can benefit you?" And I think that reframing is what's really, really important. Instead of seeing the fidgeting as something that is like, "Oh, I got to stop this," it's like, "Okay, that's you may be an excellent drummer." Like, that's something to think about. So reframing the way that we see the actions of our fellow humans, especially those who are neurodivergent.
Dr. Ifu, any advice to any creatives or songwriters who may be watching this now, same question I kind of asked Chris, what advice would you give them to accept themselves more in this industry, if you would?
Wow, that's a really good question. And I know it's easier said than done. It's like, just to, accept your difference, but that can be hard when everything else looks very different than your difference. But I think that really finding a community, finding, okay, I do this thing. Instead of me saying, okay, this thing is wrong, say, okay, who else does this thing that I do and where are they at? And if you can't find them, then, contacting organizations like Jazz Hands. Like, our whole goal is we exist to connect you to resources, to provide opportunities, to break down barriers, to advocate, to yell at whoever needs to be yelled at, to create access. So, contact us, and if we can support you, we'll help connect you with someone or something that can be a resource to you or reach out to Chris online, or reach out to you, Jay, or reach out to Sona and say, hey, I'm a neurodivergent artist, I'm a neurodivergent person, I don't know where to start. Can you connect me and lead me in one direction or the other? So I think just don't be afraid to reach out, and and by doing so, you may find community, and that can help you accept your difference more and quicker.
And if anybody wanted to reach out to you or get more information from Jazz Hands for Autism, how could they find you?
Yes. So if you're on Instagram, it's Jazz Hands for Autism, JAZZHANDSFORAUTISM on Instagram. TikTok is that, and then the number one at the end. You can also go to our website, www.jazzhandsforautism.org, or if you want to email us, it's info@jazzhandsforautism.org. So Jazz Hands, we're doing our best. The last 12 years, we've learned a lot, and our goal is to continue to improve and find more avenues for us creating access for neurodivergent individuals. So if you have any ideas on things that we haven't tapped into, please let us know, and so that we can support you in that way as well.
Thank you so much. If there's one thing I hope everyone takes away from today, is to this. Neurodiversity isn't something the music industry needs to accommodate after the fact. It's something that has always been a part of the music's greatest innovation. The question isn't whether creatives belong in this industry. The question is, how do we continue to build an industry where different minds are recognized, supported, and empowered to lead? Chris, thank you so much for sharing your
Thank
story.
you.
Dr. Ifu, thank you for the incredible work that you are doing for Jazz Hands for Autism and all of the resources and motivation that you have given us today. And thank you all for joining us for In the Room With on behalf of SONA. Until next time, you guys.
Thank you.
Peace.
Thank you.
Amazing. Stream is ended.